Thank you, Sean, and good evening, everyone. Welcome to the quarterly meeting of the trustees of the Governor Stoughton Trust. It is Tuesday, April 11th, 2023. I'm Arthur Doyle, chair of the trustees this year, and I'm joined by Vice Chair
Mike Zulis. Good evening.
Mr. Wells.
Wells, Secretary, I had on mute. Sorry, Mr. Chair.
Sorry. Ms. Bradley.
Karen Bradley, member.
And Ms. Musto will be joining us shortly. Let me start off by saying that this meeting of the trustees will be followed by a separate meeting of the select board. We have 8 items on our agenda this evening. I should mention that on March 29th, 2023, Governor Maura Healey signed a supplemental 2023 budget that includes extensions of pandemic-related authorizations. And as such, this meeting, our capability of these meetings will extend through March 31, 2025. That said, all votes will be by roll call. Ms. Musto has been able to join us, and we're sorry about making sure that you didn't go to the COA by mistake, but we've all done that. Myself
but I ended up there, so thank you.
Was there a good crowd there?
There was a
Mr. Milano was with us as well. So the meeting has been called to order. Let us join in a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item number 3 is a public comment for the Governor Stoughton trustees. And I would just mention that this would pertain at this time to only matters of business on the agenda for the Governor Stoughton trustees meeting. There will be a separate public comment for the select board agenda following this meeting. We have a set aside of up to 15 minutes for public comment, with each individual commentator allowed up to 3 minutes to address the Governor Stoughton trustees. So at this time, let us check and see if there are any hands to address the Governor Stoughton trustees. I see none at this particular time. That being the case, we'll go to item number 4. And 4A in particular, this is a discussion approval of the Governor Stoughton Trust financials, the current Governor Stoughton Trust fund status and investment position. Treasurer McAuliffe has shared information that has been distributed to all of the trustees. Mr. Milano, can we turn to you for a comment on that information, please?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. As noted, Treasurer McAuliffe provided the latest information in terms of the trust fund balance as of the close of the most recent quarter on March 31st, 2023. The total value is $5,469,000, but that does not include some recent transfers out of about $73,000. So that leaves a balance of about $5,396,000 above the $5,350,000 base that was acquired and with the transfers of the property to Pulte, the purchase, sale, and the easement of $5,350,000. So that's about $46,000 available above that $5,350,000 limit.
Thank you, Mr. Milano. And at this time, we have no requests to be drawn on or against that $46,000. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. Any questions with respect to the financial statement from any members of the trustees, please? Seeing none, we'll go to item number 5, discussion approval, town farm site, town farm structure status and condition. This it's a matter that's been on the trustees' mind for a period of time, particularly with respect to the condition of the buildings on the site. I have checked with the chair of the Milton Historic Commission. Unfortunately, they have a meeting tonight, so Mr. O'Donnell is unable to be with us. Your chair's concern at this time, after visiting that property, is with respect to the condition of the buildings and the fact that they may constitute a liability for the trustees of the Governor Stoughton Trust. So I wanted to entertain a discussion about that, get your sense of the situation and any direction that you think we ought to take with respect to those buildings. I spoke with Mr. Milano about their condition recently, and he has had a conversation with Mr. Ritchie. We, of course, would want to have the opinion of the building department and also the fire department. Mr. Milano, can I ask you to elaborate at this time?
Sure, thanks. So I've been in touch with all three over the past few months. We did meet together again as a group just this past week, just to check back in. And their current assessment is the same, that the structures are in tough shape, most likely not usable for any potential future uses. One of the things that came up was whether the structures actually should be fenced off currently. So that's something we can explore in terms of getting some prices on doing so. The other thing that came up is, obviously whether they should be taken down in their entirety right now. That is something that we would obviously want to speak to Mr. O'Donnell about and get his feedback on that. And I've communicated with him. We're planning to touch base tomorrow just to chat about his perspective on them and possible next steps. One thing that the building commissioner did suggest was that the town could, or the trustees rather, could hire an architect to go through the buildings, document them, get floor plans made so that if there was ever an intention to replicate the structures or take historical themes and architectural themes to be replicated on a future project, that's something that could be done at the trustees' expense. And we'll also explore some potential demolition costs. I know it's something that they had looked at previously, and one of the challenges is getting the necessary equipment up to the site, which would be a challenge. And there was an access built through the Pulte property. So we may have some options, but that was one of the challenges in the past when looking at it. So, happy to get some additional information on each of those potential options and bring it back to the trustees, as well as have an opportunity to speak with and touch base with Steve O'Donnell.
The floor is open to the trustees for comment and questions on this aspect of the agenda. Mr. Wells.
Chair, much of what Mr. Milano just referred to, I feel like I'm living Groundhog Day. Discussion that's been going on, dating all the way back to when Mr. Cronin filled this role. I don't know. Did you go in them? Mr. Chair, did you actually go in them?
I did not enter the buildings.
Yeah, so I've been in the big one. Is it the Arms House or the
one first on the immediate right hand side?
Yeah, that's the large one. That was the one that the town lost rented. I think I was in there a year ago with Bill Ritchie. That one has had an issue over the years with kids trying to get into it. The other one, the small one, pretty good. I know that there have been a couple of different groups, and I think Ms. Collins was last working on it, who looked at the possibility of replicating, as Mr. Milano referred to. I don't think they could be rehab. I think they're beyond rehab at this point, but I don't know about fencing them off, but maybe completely boarding them up might be, so particularly the large one, the men's arms house. That one, I don't think I've been in the smaller one, both of my time as chief or my time on this board in close to 20 years, the small one. But the big one I was in as recently as a year.
And we have the
But-
situation, if I may add, whereby the roof of one of them has been topped
Yes.
now twice over the past 3 years at expense.
Which is what did the bond in. The bond, the roof was violated and then it just grew and grew and grew, and that beautiful New England bond just eventually fell into itself. It was a 3 stories. It was a main story, main floor with a loft, beautiful loft, and had a underground horse carrier, which was actually the first animal shelter prior to the building. Just there's a little historical perspective, right? That's all. Just kind of comment.
Mr. Zulus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 3 thoughts. One, if we could get a cost estimate to fence off the buildings. 2, if we could get a cost estimate to take them down, just so we know what we're talking about in terms of cost. And 3, I'm not sure that paying an architect to replicate the buildings would serve the interests of the poor of Milton. Perhaps there could be funding from the town for that if the town is interested in that, but I'm not quite sure, and maybe we can check with town council, but I'm not quite sure that again, paying an architect for that kind of replication would be in the interest of the poor Milton. So those are my 3 thoughts. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Zulus. Ms. Musto.
Thank you. Just wondering for people that might be watching, if you could describe what is existing in terms of buildings up there, how many? That's one thing. And my second question would be, if they're historical, I'm wondering if, I know we're going to talk with our historical society, but there may be, national level historical preservation funds or something that could be used perhaps for some of this. So just wondering first how many structures are up there, and if you can tell us a little bit about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Milano.
Sure. So as has been noted, we're primarily talking about the 2 remaining larger buildings. The first one is on the right-hand side when you come in. The other one's more or less directly across from it. There is the pest house that was moved as part of the Pulte project that, it's we're not really looking at that because that's boarded off pretty well and is in decent shape, exterior wise, and has been put on a new slab. Interior would need considerable work before anything is ever done with it. So the 2 are older structures that are still standing that have been there and are under some historical protection. There's a question of whether demo delay would apply in this situation. So there are some loopholes. There are some processes that might need to be followed just to comply with the historical laws, historical restrictions that do apply in cases like these. That said, if something does pose an immediate hazard, there are mechanisms by which the town could be required to act to make that location safe.
Does that address your questions, Ms. Musto?
Yes, thank you.
You're very welcome. Mr. Wells.
So I just want to follow up to Mr. Zulus's comments, just a little. So for the many years that both of those residences were rented, the money went into the trust that went to the Milton. Not that the trust did anywhere near as much as we do now, but that's where that money went. And I do believe in the RFP that went out when Pulte was selected with regard to that 4 acres, there were incentives to bidders to either reconstruct or restore those houses and make them, again, amenable to rental, to be rented to either people who do fit the category of the poor of Milton or other renters where the money goes back into the trust to the benefit of the poor. To your point, Michael, that's unfortunately that wasn't the bid they bid, but that was an incentive that was baked into that bid back in the late 2000s, whatever.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Wells.
Mr. Chair.
one of the things that we need to keep in mind is the fact that at this particular point in time in our economy, the return on the investment is not as it has been in past years. So that we have, as Mr. Milano mentioned earlier, an amount of approximately $46,000 at the discretion of the trustees. The activities that we're discussing in general would be, for the most part, the responsibility of the trustees. And we know with the way costs are at the present time and are projected to be in the foreseeable future, they're going to only increase. In light of that information, should we start a process that begins to gather the information that is necessary in order to get possibly at the next quarterly meeting of the trustees to a decision point as to what specific next steps might be? We have cited already the desirability of engaging the Historical Commission. I think Mr. O'Donnell will be more than happy to do that. Other departments in the town. Thoughts? So that 3 months from now, we're not where we are now. Yes, Mr. Wells.
Well, one thing, Mr. Chair, clearly by the numbers that Mr. Milano just gave us, you're restricted by available funds to do very much right now, even with regard to fencing and boarding up. I mean, you could easily, fencing both those buildings could easily be a $5,000 to $10,000 project, if not more. And then, I don't know, but the other trustees, I always want to be comfortable, and I think Michael brought this up at a previous meeting, where we have some cushion there for either, particularly those who come to us the most, either the Milton Residence Fund or the food pantry, should something come up and they come to us with an unforeseen need. So I don't know, we only have what, 46,000 available
at the present time,
and when that goes up monthly, right? But not dramatically monthly.
We generally get quarterly reports.
Yeah, quarterly reports. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm kind of in a tough spot right now. You could easily eat through that 46,000 without even trying, and then have no ability to meet any of the other, as Michael says, the needs of the poor, those who come to us frequently, being the food pantry and the rest of
it. Mr. Silvers?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think just for me, if we do have cost estimates for fencing and boarding up or taking down, I think that will help the next decision point for us.
Do we have a sense that we should move toward getting more specificity of information along those lines, including updates from the departments that were mentioned earlier, along with the Historic Commission, so that this is all itemized to be presented at the quarterly meeting, which would be in July?
That's fine. I'm fine with that, Mr. Chair.
Okay. I see affirmation from Ms. Musto. Aaron, like mind. Nick, is that satisfactory to you? You don't, I think, need a formal motion on this. We have a sense of direction, and I think we're all together.
That works for me. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're very welcome. Thank you. I appreciate all of the background information. Our next item is on the same topic, and it is with respect to the animal shelter. Do we have anybody who is in the attendee list who's planning on addressing that?
I don't see any at this time. Oh, no. Mary McKettrick.
Yep.
All right. Promoting her now.
Thank you.
Okay,
And thank you for being with us.
thank you. I was just here to listen, but I will briefly provide an explanation, I guess, of why I think you have this on your agenda.
Please.
Um, I'm hoping that you'll have some discussion. We did meet with the select board last week. The next step was to meet with the Governor Stoughton trustees. So very simply, I represent the Milton Animal League, and I have been throughout this Milton Animal Shelter project since about 2014. And we have asked, periodically at that time, 2014, and then last year we sent a letter to the trustees saying, would you consider providing the option of locating the shelter at the Governor Stoughton site in case the latest, and we don't have them yet, but the latest estimates for cost of this project still exceed our ability to pay for it with what we had pledged at that time, which is about $2.5 million and some additional funds the league has raised. And, that letter is in your records, but you didn't provide a formal response. The reason I'm back now is that I have been approached by a private foundation donor or a group of donors, I'm not sure which. They wish to remain completely confidential, but they are interested in donating a matching grant for this project, which would be $2.5 million. And I've asked them about restrictions and conditions, and the only condition that they're putting forward at this time is that they would like to see the shelter located where it is now at the Governor Stoughton site, if it's possible to make arrangements to do that. We're getting estimates on the modular building construction. The ASAC committee is the building committee very soon. And I believe there will be a separate estimate. I'm hoping it's separate for the site preparation. The difference between the use of the sites is, other than the fact that you have to authorize looking into it, would be that have to be an additional engineering plan prepared for Governor Stoughton's site. We've done that for the access road. It is a difficult site. You have to bring in utilities from a long distance. There's a lot of rock and ledge in the site. We all know that. We've discussed it. And town meeting has actually appropriated some funds towards the cost because of that problem. So the reason I'm here with you tonight is to say that I would like you to consider allowing us to look at whether a very small portion of the Governor Stoughton site could be used to build the new shelter, either where the current shelter is or at another part of the site, depending on where you would prefer to locate it and depending on the other uses that you plan to enter into for this land. The arrangement would have to be it would have to be a fair market value lease. The town, believe it or not, has a lease currently with the Governor Stoughton trustees. And I know this from being a selectman from 1999 to 2011. The rent was $100 a year for many years, which is a nominal rent. But rent was paid, and I don't know if it's still being done, but they are still, the town is still renting that site in the sense that it's, probably a tenant at will if you haven't been paying the rent. But anyway, I don't know. But anyway, the point is, it was a rental arrangement. John Cronin, who was the town administrator for many years, recognized the necessity to pay into the Governor Stoughton Trust if use was going to be made of the land. So if there were to be a lease of a portion of this property, it would have to be done at a fair market value for whatever small portion were laid out on a plan as the site that was to be rented. Long term, if there were a way to purchase the small piece of land, buy the land from the trust for fair market value, that could be looked into, and it's even possible that some of this funding could be applied to that. But for the time being, the reason I'm here is to see if the trustees will consider looking at what needs to be done, what would be the steps, and can they be done quickly, and in the context of everything else that you're considering for the use of this site. So the steps, as I understand them, would be, first of all, your town council would probably need to consult with the Public Charities Division of the AG's office, who provide advice on this type of thing. A small portion would have to be located, a sketch plan, showing maybe I really don't know, 7,500 square feet, perhaps 8,000 square feet. The shelter itself at the present time with the present plan is 4,000 square feet. And there needs to be a fenced in area to take dogs out for walks individually. That's it. That's the amount of space that the shelter requires. As you know, up at Governor Stoughton now, there is relatively new water and sewer line. It was put in during the time when I was on the select board. And I don't, the quality of the site is unknown, but there was a large open field next to where the shelter is now. For many years, it was a horse paddock. So there's likely to be just open land that could be, you could use the same site and just, mark out an area. You'd have to take the current shelter down in any case. It's in very poor condition. We're really eager to get it down. So that's long and short, that's the request. And as trustees, you need to consider whether you would be willing to at least look into the steps required and whether you would consider doing this. I need to be able to report back to a potential donor that you're willing to look at it. If you were to say we are not willing to do that, then I would need to report back that we have not been given any authorization to go ahead and look at Governor Stoughton as a possible site for the animal shelter. And as far as I know, then we wouldn't be eligible for this funding. But first step is to meet here with you. And it's really a discussion for you to have among yourselves. I have not been actually paying close attention to your discussions about this site. I do have a lot of historical knowledge of what went on starting in 1999. I attended several meetings with the Public Charities Division at the Attorney General's office. I was there when we first proposed that we keep the shelter on the site, and then the AG's office said, no, you can't do that till you have a plan for the land and you're showing that you're using it to benefit the poor. Then there was a study group for several years, and then the recommendation that it be put out to bid, which is what happened, and Pulte purchased most of the property. So meanwhile, this issue of whether the shelter could still be located here, it hasn't been revisited for whatever reason, although we've asked. Meanwhile, we have a funding agreement with the town, and the selectmen select the site. That's how the funding agreement was written. So that's why we went to the selectmen first last week, because we couldn't even do anything until we asked them if they would even consider, the other location. So that's a quick summary. I'll try to answer questions if you have any. Otherwise, I'll leave you to it and have your discussion.
Well, I'd like to have you stay with us, Marion, open the floor to discussion, and maybe I can begin with two comments. One is firming up the square footage that the Animal League would be interested in, and whether that would include parking facilities, spaces, and whether or not there was interest in space for a dog walk, for example, near the facility. The second is from the chair's perspective, and this is only the chair speaking, it might be helpful to have a written outline of what it is that you have enunciated so clearly and succinctly this evening for the members of the trustees. With that said.
Yeah, thank you. I can certainly do that. As far as the square footage goes, I want to consult with the Milton Animal League and the Animal Shelter. It's a bit of a rock and a hard place. The ASAC, the building committee doesn't have a charge to look at this site. So the selectmen will need to tell their building committee that they have permission to, or they are being asked to consider this site. And then the next step would be to say to them, okay, how much land would be the minimum amount that you would need at this site? So anyway, and then the other question about a quick summary of what I gave you tonight. Yes, I wasn't sure whether you had any written material. I will provide it immediately and send it to the Governor Stoughton trustees. What is important is that hopefully you'll be willing to meet, if you have to meet again, in a fairly short time in order to go ahead if you want to review these materials and then see what the next steps are. But I think they are to specify an area, a required amount of area, and then for you to look at the site and see if where you think it might be possible to do this, then to do an engineering site assessment.
Thank you.
Which the league will be paying for. They have agreed to do that if you let them.
Other trustees? Yes, Ms. Bradley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I would like to remind everyone that we are the select board now. So if Ms. McKetrick, I know it's been a while and I know we still have old school ways of talking. If we could refer to us as a select board, that would be greatly appreciated.
Sorry, that was a slip.
It's
Sorry.
okay. That's
I know
why
that.
we're here to just remind everyone that we did make that change and we learn every day, don't we? So the next thing is, Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to have the Stoughton Trust go to the Attorney General's office to request a ruling on the use of this land. And I'd like to have our town administrator, our town clerk, our town attorney, and somebody from the Milton Animal Shelter Advisory Committee be the ones to draft that letter.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Bradley. And that would incorporate wording that we have in a draft motion to the effect of moving to ask town council to contact the Attorney General's Charities Division as you suggested.
Correct. I'd like it to be in conjunction though with somebody from the Animal Shelter Advisory Committee,
right.
and Mr. Milano.
Thank you. Is there a second to Ms. Bradley's motion since she has moved?
I'll second the motion.
Moved and seconded. Now we're open for discussion. Mr. Wells, you're recognized.
I was trying to second it as well. It's okay. So I don't know if it's a friendly amendment. I think to Ms. Bradley's motion, I think part of what we want to ask is, I think we need to paint the picture as to what is presented for a little bit of the history. I'm sure they know, how long it's been there for 40 something years. The potential plan and what we'd like to do. I think that's what's going to have to be done. And I'm not even sure how that's added to it, but I think that needs to be included in what Ms. Bradley wants the town administrator, the Animal League, and town council to do.
I think that they can just review this and somebody from the Animal Shelter Advisory Committee and the town attorney can do that. I don't know that we need to put in to a motion exactly what they should frame it as. I trust the town attorney and the and somebody from the Animal Shelter Advisory Committee who's been working on this to handle how we should phrase that.
We have the advisory from you, Mr. Wells. Is that acceptable to you?
My point, Mr. Chair, is clearly I've been in this for a long time where, as Mrs. McGettrick knows, we're 15 years into this. And I think it's Mr. Freitag. Well, Mr. Freitag may not, because he hasn't been as much as Mr. Flynn was, but Mrs. McGettrick would clearly know how many times we've been before the AG's office. I just think we need to be very specific in what we're asking for and what we're presenting. I'm fine with that. If Aaron wants to leave it, that's fine.
Okay, but we have your advisory to go with it.
We do.
Thank you. Ms. Musto.
Thank you.
And Ms. Bradley has nodded in assent to that advisory. Ms. Musto.
I was just going to say that I agree with Ms. Bradley. I do think that it's important to also add in the history, though, of that it's been there for so many years. I think that is really important because it's an existing, use. They've been paying rent. There's a contract there. So I think those pieces are important for anyone that's going to rule on this to understand that.
Thank you.
A little bit of history with that.
And Mr. Wells?
Yeah, just a follow-up to Mr. Milano on Mrs. McGettrick's point. So the rent is a line and has been a line item in the police budget for as long as I can, way before I was chief. And Mrs. McGettrick is correct. Whatever lease it was, I know during my decade we were a tenant of well. I think it might still be in play. I don't know what, if it isn't, it would have been Mr. Milano's predecessor who ended it because it existed during my tenure. I thought it was somewhere between $2,000 and $5,000 a year, but that's my memory of it. Back, and that would have been, so I left in summer 17. It was I know it was at least two, and that money went into the Governor Stone Trust. I'm sure, Nick, you can look tomorrow. I didn't see it on there. I was looking today, and when the numbers Mr. McGough provided, I didn't see it on there, and I haven't worked with the police budget in that detail in 6 years, so maybe you might want to take a peek, but it definitely, the town was a tenant of will, and the funds were paid annually from the police budget.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. We have a motion that has been duly seconded before us. Seeing no further discussion, roll call vote. Mr. Zulus,
Yes.
Mr. Wells,
Yes,
Ms. Bradley,
Yes,
Ms. Musto,
Yes,
and Mr. Doyle, yes. Thank you.
Mr.
Item
Chair,
number 6.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
before you leave that, I think
Mr.
we might
Wells,
need a second, I think we might need a second motion to Mrs. McGettrick's point. I don't think this motion addresses what we want the Animal Shelter Advisory Committee to do.
we can't do that under this meeting, Mr. Chair. That's why it's under the select
Okay,
board meeting.
all right, okay. I withdraw that, Mr. Chair.
okay, thank you, Ms. Bradley and Mr. Wells. Item number 6 is the future meeting dates. The next quarterly meeting would be in July. Going back to Ms. McGettrick's point, Marion, if business needs to be conducted in the interim, we can always call a meeting of the Governor Stoughton trustees beforehand to attend to business that would need attention. Does anybody want to suggest a date?
A date for what, Mr. Chair?
This would be the quarterly meeting of the
Oh,
Governor Stoughton trustees. Why do you want
I don't know. I don't have a
to put it
calendar.
in July in conjunction with the July meeting of the select board? Would that suffice?
I think that
Okay.
works for me.
Good. I see
I don't July.
assent from members of the board, so let's leave it at that. Our next item is discussion approval, meeting minutes, January 10, 2023, January 18, 2023, and February 7, 2023. Mr. Napoli. did you
Sorry
wish
to
to approve the
interrupt.
minutes?
No, you didn't do address letter C under number 5.
Let us see under number 5, affordable recall. Thank you very much. I didn't see that on the comment sheet, but I do see it on the agenda. And this is a thoughtful reminder from Executive Administrative Assistant Linda Napoli to the effect that there will be a meeting at Fuller Village this week, the 13th of April, from 7 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. that will address the Miltonstown Farm, the past, present, and future. An opportunity to learn about the amazing history of Miltonstown Farm from 1701 until the present. Comment goes on, dream with us about what it could be in the future. There'll be guest speakers, Tom Kelleher, who's a historian and curator of mechanical arts at Old Sturbridge Village, and Laura Schufelt, I hope I pronounced the name correctly, Director of Community Assistance at Massachusetts Housing Partnership. Thank you for that reminder, Lynn. Now we turn to the minutes. I have reviewed them. Yes.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes for January 10th, January 18th, and February 7th, 2023.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. Is there a second? Thank you, Mr. Zulus. Seeing no further discussion, Mr. Zulus,
Yes.
Mr. Wells,
Yes,
Ms. Bradley,
Yes,
Ms. Musto,
yes,
and Mr. Doyle, yes. This
Mr.
time
Chairman.
being no, yes, Mr. Zulus,
I was
please.
just gonna move to adjourn.
Thank you.
Second.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr.
Second.
Wells. Roll call vote, Mr. Zulus,
Yes.
Mr. Wells,
yes.
Ms. Bradley,
yes.
Ms. Musto,
yes.
and Mr. Doyle, yes. Thank you. We are adjourned from the Governor Stoughton trustees meeting, and we will now turn to the select board meeting, and we will call that meeting to order. This is a meeting of Tuesday, April 11, 2023 of the Milton, Massachusetts Select Board. And again, as previously noted, Governor Maura Healey signed a supplemental bill that includes provisions allowing remote and hybrid meeting options for public bodies through March 31st, 2025. As such, all votes for this meeting of the Select Board will be by roll call. I would just note for those who are attending the meeting that there are 2 items identified for executive session, item 7 and item 13. Those executive session items will not be part of the Select Board's business this evening. So at this time, I'll introduce myself as Arthur Doyle, this year's chair of the Select Board, and call upon the other members of the Select Board to introduce themselves.
Thank you, Chair Doyle. Mike Zulus, Vice Chair.
Richard Wells, Secretary.
Aaron Bradley, member.
Roxanne Musto, member.
And with us, we have Nicholas Milano,
Good evening.
our town administrator, Linda Napoli, executive administrative assistant,
Hi,
and Kevin
everyone.
Whiteg, a town council. We have already done the Pledge of Allegiance at the previous meeting. So at this time, we'll go to a public comment. And again, a reminder that we have 15 minutes set aside for public comment with each commentator with up to 3 minutes to address the Select Board. The first hand raised is that of Christine Hodland. Could you please move up Chris as a participant? All members of the public addressing the Select Board are reminded to identify themselves and to cite their address. Chris, welcome. You're
Thank you very
recognized.
much. I appreciate your letting me speak tonight, and I will try to keep it to 3 minutes. So I'm actually here to comment on the mailer that was produced by the Milton Votes organization and paid for by the Milton Republican Town Committee. I have a copy, and I'm willing to share it with anyone who isn't on this board who requests it. The mailer is addressed to Milton Republicans to encourage them to vote in this year's election and weigh in on initiatives that will come before them or our elected officials. The initiatives as identified are wildly provocative, outlandish, and they are not based on any real facts. The descriptive language sounds like much of the political rhetoric that we've experienced in the last several years in our national politics. So much for our local elections in Milton and politics to remain nonpartisan, as they have been for so many years that I've been participating. I sent you all an email, everyone on here, and also including Susan Galvin and Robert Hiss. And I did hear back from Susan Galvin. She and I talked quite a bit. I heard back from Robert Hiss, and I spoke with Mike Zulus this afternoon. Our clerk, Susan Galvin, responded immediately. She reviewed the website, which contains the pictures and links to several of the candidates running for office in April. And also it contains sample ballots with town meeting member names. The ballots look like the ones that she has on her website, but certainly they weren't the same. She contacted the town council, Mr. Freytag, and the director and legal counsel of elections for the Commonwealth. Their legal opinion is that the Milton Votes website itself does not violate any state election laws. She also contacted Sarah Hartree from the State Office of Campaign and Political Finance. Attorney Hartney is conducting an investigation. I am unclear of the process by which the Milton Republican Town Committee authorizes expenses such as this mailer without the members being aware, if that is what was done. I have a query out to the current chair, Carrie White. Mr. Hiss gave me her contact information, so I have a few questions out to her. I have to say that I am most concerned that our town moderator, Robert Hiss, is a current member, a past chair, and a contributor, donator to the Milton Republican Town Committee that funded this mailer. I don't have a problem with him being a member of that committee, but the fact that this mailer came paid by that group and that he is associated with it is very, very concerning to me. He shared with me that he had no involvement in the creation of this trash, I'm going to call it, that's my words, not his. And he said he has no relationship with the Milton Votes organization. That being said, Mr. Hiss presides over our town meeting, and he should be perceived as and execute all his duties as totally impartial towards all warrant articles, especially those referred to in this mailer. I am asking Mr. Hiss and all the candidates who appear on this website to publicly disavow the information shared in this mailer. I personally will not vote for anyone who remains connected to this website and uses it as a platform for their candidacy. I also ask the town administrator and the select board to consider, is there anything that you can do to prevent this type of potentially perceived bias by our elected officials in the future? I ask all of our Milton residents and citizens to be respectful and truthful in our discourse on the many issues that come before us. I've lived in Milton for a very long time, and I've been a part of the political scene for quite a while. It's a great town, and I'm very proud to be a part of it. As a town, we've always pulled together when we've gotten things done. We've built new schools, fire stations, and on and on and on. I am very disappointed and saddened to speak before you today because a tiny minority believes that the only way to get their way is to lie and unnecessarily frighten people about imaginary events that will never happen. The only way to defeat this kind of deceitful conduct is to resoundingly vote for those who tell the truth and work to make Milton better. And I thank you all for letting me speak tonight. And I'm sure you all take that mailer seriously and will look to do something about it. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hodlin. Our next speaker is identified as Steve G. Could you promote Steve G as the participant, please?
Hello, Mr. Chair.
Good evening. Could you fully identify yourself and provide your address, please?
My name is Steve Gentile. I live at 85 Adams Street in Milton, Massachusetts. And I'm going to be talking about, there's a signage proposal for the building next to mine. I guess it was a neon sign. Are you familiar with this?
Oh, it was addressed at the last select board meeting and is on the agenda for this evening. So we would welcome your comments.
Okay, thank you. So I guess I have 3 points I want to make about the sign that's being proposed adjacent to the house I live in. Is the first one is, let's put it this way, beauty is subjective, but is it clear what the rule is? And I'm not clear what the rule is, but that'd be question number one. But the second question I have is, why aren't there any illuminated signs in the village right now? And I think, just to answer my own question, the answer would be that it's a traditional village, that bright signs like that aren't typical in that area. And the fact is that if putting a bright sign in there is allowed, then you set a precedent and we'll have more bright signs. So it could be a competition of bright signs. So in that case, I think the word might be light pollution. And in many cases, I think in other portions of design and zoning restrictions, they do keep an eye on light pollution. So it doesn't, so you're not shooting light into the sky. Okay, so that's generally the reason I think the village is traditional is because it's dimly lit. It doesn't have bright signs. So that's perhaps the first point. The second point I would make is I think the sign to me could be considered a safety issue because in my experience with the sign on day one, when it first went up, I was looking out the front window and it was getting to be dusk. And I thought it was emergency vehicles out front, but it was pink. It wasn't red and it wasn't flashing. So the lights were being projected onto the Masonic building. So I thought, this is very strange. So I went out and then I saw the sign and I realized it was just a retail signage. But I just wasn't used to that. But, and that's okay. I can deal with, unusual things. But the fact is, I think a driver on Adam Street, if they're speeding, sometimes they pick up speed coming down the hill or they're coming from the intersection at Elliott, they might want to, as they're driving, look up and see what that sign is for, and it could be a driving hazard, as well as if you're driving up from Moore Street, you could be like mesmerized by that bright pink sign and not be paying attention what's coming to the left or right, and that's a pretty treacherous intersection. And the third point I'll make is I feel bad because the business owner probably spent $500 on that sign or maybe more, and they can't use it. And I think sometimes when you talk like this, you come off as like NIMBYism. And I think everyone I talk to around here is like, we're pro-business. We're definitely want to see those existing buildings succeed. It's in our interest to have those businesses, those small businesses stay there as is, keep the status quo. So, so I think if the town could clarify its policy to new business owners as they come into town, it could alleviate some of this neighbor involvement in the local government process, because it's not personal. I don't know who they are, but it's just like a clearer process with the town. I myself went to the website where the signage is supposed to be, and I had a hard time finding it. And I'm not interested in even putting up a sign, but I did find it by accident. It's a very good document. It's a very good proposal of beautiful signage, but finding it is not the easiest. So I was going to propose if there's some, I know on Central Ave, they had an outreach with boots on the ground to modify the parking, and they went to business owners and they kind of talked to them about what their parking needs were, and they modified the parking restrictions over there. I don't know if anything's needed here, but that kind of attitude to reaching out to the business owners could be useful. As they come into the town, they're starting a new business. What are the rules? What's the best way to succeed in Milton? There could be internships with Milton High School, where young people are learning how to market a business. What's the best way to do it? Or Curry College or Milton Academy. So those are just some of my ideas of why I'm just concerned about the parking. Not the parking, the signage, the bright pink sign, because I'm representing other people's opinions in this area as well. That people have said they just don't like the look of it. And I think it's more than that. I think as you come up.
Thank you. We're running out of time.
Okay, I'm done. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for your comments, Steve. Our next speaker is Pete Jackson. Could we promote Pete? Welcome, Pete. You are muted. Pete, you're muted. If you can hear us.
You can hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Good evening, and thanks for the opportunity to speak. I just want to start by saying thank you to Chris Hodlin, one of our local heroes. My comments tonight relate to item number 9 on your agenda, the transfer of real estate. I think it's important for each parcel as you review it that you identify who the parcel is being transferred from and who it's being transferred to. I think that'll help things more clearly. Specifically, item D, the Highland Street and Canton Avenue. The parcel was purchased in 1971 based on Article 42 of the 1971 town meeting for the Wendell Brook Conservation and Water Management Area with funds from the Commonwealth and HUD, and is already protected under Article 97, so it really can't be part of an Article 97 exchange. Item E, Pope's Pond, was acquired after a town meeting vote in 1963 for open space, natural resource, and watershed protection purposes. It is already protected under Article 97, so it can't be part of an Article 97 swap. Your items F, G, and H, which are new parcels identified this evening for the first time. That's the Ash Street Playground. These parcels were put under the control of the Park Department by a town meeting vote in 1964. They're already protected under Article 97, so they can't be part of an Article 97 swap. Lastly, I want to remind you of something that I've highlighted before. From the Code of Federal Regulations addressing land conversion for properties acquired with federal open space funds says, and I quote, "Land currently in public ownership, including that which is owned by another public agency, may not be used as replacement land for land acquired as part of a land and water conservation fund project." If you have any need of any further documentation on any of these items, I'll be happy to provide it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jackson. Seeing no other hands, we will at this time return to the agenda and take up item number 3, discussion approval, appeal of a decision of the Sign Review Committee.
Mr. Chair?
Lounge located at 75 Adams Street, Suite F. Ms. Musto, you're recognized.
I had wanted to say something at that last thing for the public comment. I didn't know if it should go there. I had wanted to read something in about the amateur gardeners, the letter that they sent us. Could I read it here before we get into the sign? Would that be okay? Or do you want me to read it somewhere else?
We could do it.
I didn't see a chance to read it somewhere. That's why.
I think it would be fine. Let's consider this public comment continued. So go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much for just giving me a few minutes. I just thought it was that we should read this into the record. So Mr. Milano had received a note from the Amateur Gardeners of Milton, their notice of the dissolution of their club. And if it could take a minute just to read it in, I think it would be nice to do this. So it says, "Dear Mr. Milano, it's with mixed emotions, mostly sad ones, that we write today to advise you that the Amateur Gardeners of Milton, one of the town's 2 gardens clubs, has determined that the club will be dissolved as of June 30th of this year. For over 70 years, the Amateur Gardeners Club has served the town of Milton in a myriad of ways to promote civic beautification through its planting and maintenance of numerous sites throughout the town, to educate Milton's students through various horticultural programs in the elementary schools, and by contributing tens of thousands of dollars in scholarships to deserving Milton High School graduates, to serve Milton seniors by providing annual programming at the Council of Aging, and to bring the joy of plants and planting to residents of Milton through its annual spring plant sale and holiday decorating opportunity. Unfortunately, today we find ourselves unable to sustain the level of membership needed to fulfill all of the tasks we've taken on and thoroughly enjoyed since 1952. Accordingly, the Amateur Gardeners of Milton officers are in the process of taking the necessary steps to dissolve the club. Decisions will need to be made regarding maintenance of the following town sites that we will no longer be able to maintain. The Town Hall campus, which we have planted and maintained in tandem with John Driscoll and Driscoll Landscaping. The Welcome to Milton site at Route 138 and Campton Ave. This site has become somewhat problematic due to increased traffic and in recent years has suffered a number of encroachments by vehicles. The two historic houses through planters and their surrounds located at the old Bent's Cookie Factory and at Algerine Corner at Adams and Center Streets. We will be happy to work with the town to transition these sites, but we cannot continue to have major responsibility for any of them going forward. Our focus will be on making the sites as low maintenance as possible before we discontinue our role. The Amateur Gardeners Club has also provided live greens and wreaths for the town hall and various other town buildings at the holidays. This practice too will unfortunately end. We are investigating obtaining a faux garland for the gazebo and will advise the DPW of our progress. We will also be notifying the Police Department, Milton DPW, Cunningham Hall, and the Council on Aging in the Milton Hospital that we will no longer be able to provide them with holiday greens. It has been our pleasure to serve Milton for over 70 years, and we thank you for the town's support over these many decades.
Thank you, Ms. Musto, and I think recognition has to be given to them for their 7 decades of tremendous service to the town of Milton. It would not be the town that is presented without the contributions that they have made. Mr. Wells.
Mr. Chair, I think it'd be prudent of us to invite the leadership of the Amateur Gardeners of Milton to our final meeting, to our next meeting. That was good, huh? To our next meeting, and thank them personally. What Ms. Musto described is just a sliver of all they've done in this town for so long, and it is sad that they are ending after a 70-year reign. So I think maybe if Mr. Milano could arrange to invite as many as they want, and we could put it on early in our agenda for our next meeting to thank them personally and publicly for all they've done for this community.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. Let us extend that invitation. Thank you again. So returning to item number 3, the topic has been read. What I would like to suggest that we do this evening, since we have heard from the applicant on this issue, is invite the chair of the sign review committee, who is with us this evening, to share his comments. Then we can return to the applicant, and after having heard from both parties, turn to the discussion and a decision by the select board. So John, if you could be promoted and join us. Good evening, John.
Good evening, everyone.
It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you for the invite.
The floor is yours, sir.
Oh, okay. So what would you like to know? Are the decision-making of the committee?
Yes, you raised a couple of points with me in conversation, and I think those would be fair points to express this evening on behalf of the sign review committee.
Okay, thank you. Well, we received the application for Infinity Beauty Lounge, and it was an application for a lit sign, and it was a neon sign for the located in the window of the business that was on the 2nd floor of 75 Adams Street. So we reviewed it as a committee, and one of the things we tried to do as a committee is stay consistent with our decision making over the years. And over the years, there have been 3 light fixtures that we have consistently not approved. One of those being neon fixtures, a second being internally lit box, and the third is like a moving message board sign. So over the years, we have not approved those types. So following our standards, it was a easy decision for the committee to not approve the neon sign for Infinity Beauty Lounge.
I think you might want to clarify the unanimous decision of the sign review committee in that it wasn't a total disallowance of the sign.
Oh, correct. We allowed the sign, we just did not allow the light source. Correct.
Illumination. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Any further comments or any questions of John by members of the select board at this time? Seeing none. Yes, Ms. Bradley, your hand is raised. You're recognized.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I just had a couple questions for the chair of the sign committee. Did you issue permits for I can count 4 off the top of my head, real estate companies that have lit signs that go 24 hours?
I'd have to know the names of them. We have approved signs for real estate. We have approved signs for real estate agencies, yes.
So they're approved for that for overnight, lit overnight.
Like I said, I'd have to go back and check the decisions.
So that completely violates our town bylaws of Article 12 if the signs are being lit overnight and you approve that. So,
Correct.
So there seems to be an issue between what you and the sign committee are following and what our actual town bylaws are. And so I would just like to understand why it is that your committee does not follow our town bylaws as written.
I believe we follow the town bylaws as written.
Okay, so in the town bylaws.
We usually, when there's illumination, we ask that it's set for certain hours.
Yep. So, so sure enough, it says that it can only be operated during business hours. This is Article 12.
Yes.
And so it's only supposed to be during business hours. So there shouldn't be anything that's lit when a business is closed. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. So, so as long as the sign is not flashing and as long as there's no bright lights and it doesn't go into a neighboring place, there's no reason why an illuminated sign should not be allowed since you've done it in other places, correct?
Well, it depends on the type of illumination.
So it's a subjective thing. It's not it's not following the actual bylaws. It's whether or not you think it's pretty or not.
Well, that's part of the sign design review guidelines and those for our committee. Yes, the guidelines that give you the technical parameters, but it doesn't tell you what color, it doesn't tell you what shape, it doesn't tell you what it should look like.
Right. So I was driving the other day.
That's why you have us.
On Adams Street, and I was driving home from Quincy, so I was heading towards the square, and I was struck by the neon sign of Pliables, which is ginormous and right inside of their establishment, which goes right through the front window, which was, there's nothing blocking that. So I just happened to notice that, and I know it's not in the window, but it did strike me when I drove by how it's bigger than the 20% as you require in the bylaws, and it absolutely hits neighbors' eyes as you're driving by. So I think that there seems to be some discrepancies on how we are allowing signs to go through, who's permitted and who's not permitted. And who's allowed to have those signs on 24/7, because that is a direct violation of not only the bylaws, but from what I read, your guidelines as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. Well, we're not enforcement. We just approve the signs. So if Pliables has a neon sign within their store, that's not part of the exterior signage.
No, you're right.
And if real estate agencies are turning their lights on all night, again, we're not going to run by and knock on their door and say, you got to turn them off.
But you would if it was this illuminated sign, because people don't like the color of it and the way it looks.
I would not go by this business and knock on the door and say you have to turn it off.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome.
Mr. Wells, you're recognized. You're muted, Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just kind of a follow-up to Ms. Bradley's and John's comments. I did go to meet with Mr. Prondak on this week because we'll be
Are you
making
fading, Mr. Wells?
Can you hear me?
Yes, better now.
We can. Richard, I just wouldn't lean back.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Sean. So I did go to see Mr. Prondak just to ask him specifically because I did see the playable sign. I did go and see it. It is an internal sign. It's not like the sign for the business. It's like if you got a sign in the living room in your business, it's not. It's set back in the building versus. But I mean, Erin's correct in the effects of it. So I do believe, but it's probably outside the scope of the sign review committee. There are 2 points. I did ask Prondak specifically if any of these were in violation. He said no. And I did take a ride through there twice. Businesses do have lighting, and the lighting that I viewed would be lighting that I would consider lighting that is like deterrent to crime, lighting that lights the area at night. I didn't see, and I haven't seen the sign that was denied either. I only seen the picture, which is a neon sign, and I did read you on your description that you wrote about it. So I know it's not a perfect world, but I have been before your committee in the past, and I've both in this role and in prior roles dealt with these issues in the past. So I do think that you were doing your best due diligence as you could with this on the sign that is before us now. And again, Mr. Chair, Mr. Prondak could articulate to me no violations specific to the other businesses that were mentioned at our prior meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. Mr. Zulus, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chair Zekowitz, just a question. Is the issue or was the issue with the sign the neon aspect of it as opposed to illumination? Or
Yes. Oh, that is the source of illumination is neon.
So I'm just trying to understand. So the other illuminated signs that are not neon are acceptable. Is that the idea?
Yes, we typically accept other ones. I mean, we review them.
Yeah.
There's a lot of gooseneck lighting. There's some edge band lighting signs that kind of soften and just light the edge of the letters. A lot of different ways you can light a sign, and we talked to the owner about possibilities about other ways to light this sign.
So if this sign were illuminated in a way that was other than neon, then that would be allowed and would be consistent with your prior decisions?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, sir.
But if I can make one, just for the rest of the board to understand, back in 2017, when the new bylaws were being put together, we were given by Bill Clark a set to review, and we requested that those three lights that I described earlier be included in section 12. And the comment that came back to us said that's too much specificity, that those decisions should stay with the design review committee. I didn't think that was correct, but that's where we stand. If that could be changed, it would be fantastic.
Mrs. Zulus, your hand is raised for the comment.
I do have one follow-up. Just thank you, Chair Zuercher. So the three types of light fixtures or illumination that you consistently don't allow, that is something that has been determined by the design review committee and is not in a bylaw or a rule or a design. That is just in the discretion of the design review committee. Is that right?
Primarily, yes. We've gotten some townspeople feedback on certain things, and so we incorporate it into what we review.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mrs. Zulus. Any other members of the select board?
Mr. Chair, I just had a quick question.
Ms. Musto is recognized, and then we'll go to Ms. Bradley.
Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you. I also saw that you have a checklist too. And on the checklist, I believe it says no, neon is not allowed. So I did look at the checklist. Correct.
Hardly ever. Rarely, if ever.
Okay.
We were told we
I saw
could put
that.
never.
All right, thank you.
Ms. Bradley, back to you.
Thanks so much, Mr. Chair. Actually, now I have two questions. Thanks, Ms. Musto, for pointing that out. So in this that are rarely, if ever, approved are backlit signs. That would be exactly what the 4 real estate companies I know of in town have. They basically backlight a listing. They can have up to 20 in their windows, if not more. But my second and real question that I was here to ask was, do we know that this is neon or is it LED? Because that's 2 totally different materials that are being used.
It's an LED neon light.
Oh, it's
a
LED.
It's LED, but it's a neon light. Just like you can have a
Well, it's
LED
neon
bulb.
color, but it's not a neon, it's an LED light.
No, it's neon. It's just made from LED filament.
And what's neon made of?
Neon is glass tubes with, if you're doing traditional neon, it's a blown glass tube that has gases in it that get activated and colored.
Right, but that
But
would be
they don't make
neon.
them that way anymore.
Right, so that's what the neon is. So the LED lights are not exactly neon. Because neon is a specific type of lighting that you just described.
Right, but
Okay.
this is still neon, yes. It's made from LED filaments, but it's neon.
Okay.
Any further questions? John, thank you for.
Arthur, sorry, Sean here. I do see someone in the attendees column that keeps opening and raising their hand underneath the name Laura Simondi.
Yes, Lara will be, as I mentioned at the introduction of this item, invited in a minute to return to the select board for her comments. At this time, I want to thank John for joining us and extend to you and the members of the Sign Review Committee our appreciation for your service to the community.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
You too. Thank you again. Sean, could you now promote, please, Lara?
Will do. Sorry about that.
Not at all.
Oh, hello.
Ms. Armando, welcome back. You're right.
Thank you. Hi, sorry, I didn't know if my hand was being raised or put down, and I kept wanting to say, no, it's an LED sign, it's not neon. Thank you very much. My name is Lara Simondi. I'm of Infinite Beauty Lounge. I'm at 76 Allerton Road is my address. Again, just wanted to reiterate again what Ms. Bradley said, which I had brought to the sign committee, that the real estate listings are advertisement and they are LED signs, lit signs that promote listings. Again, mine is an LED sign. It's in the window in a commercial zone. There is no way that traffic will get distracted by it because I'm on the 2nd floor. So when you're driving parallel to my sign, and it will not cause an accident. There's no way. Pliables could cause more of an accident than my sign, which is way above. And when you're driving, you're looking ahead. You're not looking above into the sky. And we talked a little bit last week about, again, I'm not asking for my sign to be lit throughout the night like the real estate signs are. I'm just asking for it to be lit during my working hours. And I, again, work across the street from 4 businesses that have signs. Hajar has an illuminated sign, Citizen Bank, illuminated, the real estate, all illuminated, and the hardware store has a Stifel sign in the window, or I don't know what it is. It's a branding of a tractor, or I'm not sure what it is, but it is an advertisement and it's lit. It's an orange sign. And that's on ground level. My business is on the 2nd floor. The reason I need visibility is because I am set back with the balcony in front and an awning. So that's, again, I'm just kind of reiterating what was said last week. And I appreciate that you're taking time to consider it during this important time for you, during the select committee.
Thank you.
Thank
Any questions for Ms. Mondi for members of the board? Okay, seeing none, the chair would, for those who, Mr. Zulus, yes, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Simondi, do you know whether, is this an LED sign or is it an LED neon sign or?
It's an LED sign. It's an energy efficient sign. The sign makers, they do not make neon signs anymore because you can't fix them. I can give you the name of the manufacturer. She says it uses less energy than Christmas tree lights, and it does not cause reflection across the street, which there's nothing in front of me, so there's no building to reverberate the light. So I'm not really sure, Mr. Steve, how that occurs. But again, it's definitely LED, and we can send you the manufacturer information.
Oh, okay, and I'm just trying to understand because the chair of the design review committee referred to an LED neon sign. So I just,
yeah, I think it's because of the color. So I think neon pink is what comes to mind. So it's kind of used erroneously. The word is not, it's a pink sign. Again, we love all colors of the rainbow. It's just a sign. It's just a color that grabs your attention. I just want to say that I had a new client who found me the week that I had to sign up for 1 week before it was brought down because I hadn't applied for the appropriate permits. And when I have a new client, I always ask, how did you find me? And she said she was walking her dog and she looked up and she saw the beautiful sign. She goes, oh my God, that is such a cute sign. She Googled me. She said, oh my gosh, this is wonderful. And then she became a client. And I just want to put that out there that my sign achieved exactly what I wanted to do. It creates, it brings attention to it and then creates an interest, and people will search it. And then I potentially get a new client. And that's what business is all about. So I wanted to bring her to the sign committee meeting. But anyway.
Thank you. For those attending the meeting who didn't have an opportunity to attend last week's meeting of the select board where this was discussed, I just want to make sure everybody understands that this is an appeal of a decision of the sign review committee by Infinite Beauty Lounge to the select board. Such appeals are permitted under section 4D to town meetings amending chapter 10 of the general bylaws in October of 2017. The sign in question was approved by the sign review committee with the special condition that approval was without illumination. And it is that special condition that is being appealed. There is a proposed motion before the select board, and I will read it. It is moved to either approve or to disapprove the appeal of a decision made by the sign review committee relative to Infinite Beauty Lounge located at 75 Adams Street, Suite F, to permit illumination of the sign during operating hours. And I believe in the discussion last week, there was some sense within the select board that those operating hours would be only between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. If that is an accurate recollection.
I thought she said 7.
7, okay. Thank you very much.
And I think
we have recognized Mr. Wells first and then go to Mr. Zulus, if I may. Mr. Wells. You're muted, Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is for the chair of the sign review committee. Because this is not a common, I believe this is in my 6 years, this is the first appeal we've ever heard here of the sign review decision. So the sign review board approved this sign by design unilluminated. Can I just ask how it came to your, how did it come to your attention that it was in fact illuminated? Was it on a complaint or was it a complaint to Mr. Prondak? Do we know how the how this wound up, what happened to make it get back to you and then wind up here? Can anyone answer that question?
It was on a complaint,
By
a
No.
town, or
a
I don't know if they-
town, a citizen?
a citizen. I don't know if they want to remain anonymous,
No,
but
I don't need another identity. I just,
Yeah.
and Mr. Milan, where did that complaint go?
To the building commissioner.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That was all I wanted, I need to know is how did we wind up here? I understand the decision, I understand the appeal. I just want a little clarity on what happened and how did this wind up here? Thank you.
Mr. Zulus, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to add with respect to the operating hours, I thought last week we had discussed Monday through Friday.
correct. That's fine. I don't want it lit on the weekend, to be honest with you, because I will most likely will not be there.
Okay, so if the motion were to be made and approved, it would read of the sign during operating hours, only 10 a.m. to 7 p.m., Monday through Friday. Okay. So what is the will of the board?
Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to make that motion.
And the motion being?
Exactly what you just read, that the, that
But
the
to
select
approve or
board
disapprove?
disapprove of the sign review committee's determination and allow for illumination Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. of Infinite Beauty Lounge.
So your motion then is to following, move to approve the appeal of a decision made by the sign review committee relative to Infinite Beauty Lounge located at 75 Adams Street, Suite F, to permit illumination of the sign during operating hours of 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Friday.
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Chair. That's my motion.
Thank you, Ms. Bradley. Is there a second to Ms. Bradley's motion?
I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Zulus. The motion is moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Wells, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for the purpose of discussion, I understand very much her request to do business. I also understand in the history of the sign review committee, as well as our town planner, design review committee, and two, without naming, one of the residents who's done so much work in that historic village district that I can't even go on, who also brought this to my attention. I'm not willing to open this door, so I intend to vote no on this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. Ms. Musto, you're recognized.
Thank you. I would say that I'm a little concerned with what kind of precedent this might set. We do have a sign review committee for a reason, with their expertise and reviewing these proposals. And so I'm a little bit concerned about that piece of it. And I just want to know, in all the time that you've been reviewing signs, have we had any major issues with this type of thing, or from the chair of the sign committee?
John, that's a question to you.
Am I still on screen?
Yes.
Oh, okay. The only sign I think that's ever been appealed, oh, I know there's only been one that's been appealed. It's the moving message board above, I think what's currently, and I apologize to the owner if I say the name wrong, rebuilt?
Referring to the sleepy sign, the sleepy.
Yeah, the sleepy sign. Yeah,
sleepy.
start off with sleepy sign. I think we disapproved that at least twice, and it got appealed and approved by the select board twice.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Ms. Musto?
Yes.
Thank you. Any further discussion? It has been moved and seconded. Roll call vote. Mr. Zulus.
Yes.
Mr. Wells.
No.
Ms. Bradley.
Yes.
Ms. Musto.
No.
And Mr. Doyle, yes. Thank you all. This is a hard decision. I would like to make the following comment from my perspective in reviewing this. It's very important that all of this be knit together, and that whatever it is that we have as a checklist comport with the handbook and with the bylaws, just again, from my perspective. And I could only make a decision based upon what is in front of us with respect to them. If we need to have modifications made, then I would recommend that they go through the process that is necessary in order to update the bylaws. And maybe that is a process that John might begin with the sign review committee, and then have us look wholeheartedly across the board at revisions that might take place, assuming any approvals or modifications to the existing bylaws that would be reflected in an updating of the handbook as well, so that everything is together. We have as little ambiguity as possible, and something that makes everybody's job much more easy. So out of this experience, I'm sure there will come some good and some progress. And I thank everybody for their patience and their contributions.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate everything. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I could just say one thing.
Yes, Ms. Bradley.
Thank you so much. I remember that Laura said, it's Laura, right?
Yes.
Sorry. You had said during the meeting at the select board that you were willing to volunteer to be on the sign committee.
Yeah.
I would hope that you would still consider volunteering to do that. And I would strongly recommend that you fill out an application for a volunteer application for that position.
I have. I did it probably January 13th. It was like a couple of days after the meeting on January 10th.
Great. Well, I can definitely say that I would hope that we could discuss that at a later date. But I just wanted to note that and I don't know if this is true, Mr. Chair of the Sign Review Committee, but it sounds like the two buildings that you, I see Kevin raising his hand, which means I probably should not be talking. But I just wanted to say that it would be great if you and other citizens would apply for these committees, because it's much needed. So thank you.
Mr. Freitag, you're recognized. Mr. Freitag? Kevin, your hand is raised, but you are on mute.
He just spoke for a second, Mr. Chair. I just heard his voice, and then I have not heard him since.
We've lost contact with you, Kevin. Can you hear us? You're on mute again, Kevin?
He took the rest of the night off.
I stopped talking, so maybe he'll put his hand down.
I can see Mr. Freitag turning his microphone on, but there's no sound coming out. So the orange one.
Maybe he could call in as an alternative.
That's certainly an option.
Okay, he has dropped off the screen, so maybe that's what he is doing at present.
We'll keep an eye out for him.
Let's give him another minute. And thank you for your patience. I have him in the attendees list. Sean, can you promote
Yes,
him?
sir. Yes, sir. I just promoted him to panelist. I
There
see.
we go. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you. Can you hear me now, Mr. Chair?
We can all hear you. Very good.
Hear you and see you. Thank you.
Thank you. I was just going to recommend that perhaps just for the sake of keeping a consistent record, this board may want to, as part of its decision tonight, reversing the decision of the sign commission, instruct the sign commission to order a new decision consistent with this board's order. And that way the sign commission will have a record of this board's sort of disapproval of its decision and then of an issuance of the sign. And then the applicant for the sign could get a copy of that subsequent approval for their records as well.
Thank you for that, Mr. Freitag. And I see that John is nodding in assent. That is agreeable to you?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Thank you very kindly.
And yeah, I think it's a great idea to get it in the record.
Mr. Zulus, you're recognized.
So was the recommendation to have a motion to recommend? Was that the recommendation from Mr. Freitag, that there would be a motion to recommend that the sign review committee issue a decision consistent with the decision of the select board?
Yes.
It looks like
in the affirmative.
Okay, so I'll make the motion to recommend. I'm not rather than instruct, to recommend that the design review committee issue an order consistent with the decision of the select board.
Is there a second, please?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Bradley. Moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Wells, you
can we
recognize.
do that? Can we do that based on what the way the motion was? That's different from what's listed in our agenda. Kevin Freitag. It's a different motion. You just made a motion that's not on the agenda here to be made. I'm not trying to give it, but I know.
No,
This is
we
actually a
understand.
Kevin Freitag point that I just brought up. This is a point that you would. That's not the motion that's on this agenda. That's fine.
Mr. Chair, if you'd like, I can respond to that.
Please, Mr. Freitag, you're
Yeah.
recognized.
I think it's okay here. I mean, it's typical for courts of review to make a decision and then recommend or instruct a lower or, lower court is sort of how you typically see it, to do something that's consistent with the decision by the appeal court. I think that that's just sort of the natural effect of the board's decision now. Just rather than have this select board have it in their minutes, and then the applicant need to get a certified copy of these minutes to show that the decision was to reverse the decision. It might be just cleaner for the sign commission to have it in their record. And I think that follows from what's on the agenda and would be an appropriate motion for this board to consider.
Thank you, Mr. Freitag. And it has been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Mr. Zulus.
I just want to say, I don't consider just what Mr. Freitag said, I don't consider the sign review committee a lower body or a lower court in any way, but so just to point that out.
Thank you for that. Okay. Moved and seconded. No further discussion. Roll call vote. Mr. Zulus.
Yes.
Mr. Wells.
Yes.
Ms. Bradley.
Yes.
Ms. Musto. You're muted, Roxanne, but I think you said yes.
Yes.
Thank you. And Mr. Doherty, yes. Thank you, everybody. We now move
Thank you
on
very
to
much.
item
Thank you.
number 4, which is discussion approval, submittal of a statement of interest to the Massachusetts School Building Authority. There is a motion which I will read on behalf of the select board. Mr. Milano, I wanted to see if you had any comments that you wanted to share on this before I read the motion.
No comments from me, Mr. Chair. I know the school committee chair is in the attendee pool if you were looking for some commentary from the school committee at all.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Milano. And I'll read the motion. And this is again as cited, proposed motion with MSBA's required language. Having convened in an open meeting on April 11, 2023, prior to the SOI submission closing date. The Select Board of Milton, in accordance with its charter, bylaws, and ordinances, has voted to authorize the superintendent to submit to the Massachusetts School Building Authority the statement of interest form to be submitted to the Massachusetts School Building Authority by no later than Friday, April 14th, 2023, for consideration in 2023 for the Cunningham Elementary School located at 44 Edge Hill Road, Milton, Massachusetts, which describes and explains the following deficiencies in the priority categories which an application may be submitted to the Massachusetts School Building Authority in the future. Priority 2, elimination of existing severe overcrowding. Priority 4, prevention of severe overcrowding expected to result from increased enrollments. The elementary enrollment in Milton Public Schools has grown by 24%, 451 students over the past 15 years since the last school building project was completed, from 1,873 students in 2008 to 2,324 students in 2023, far exceeding the capacity of Milton Elementary School buildings, and hereby further specifically acknowledges that by submitting the statement of interest form, the Massachusetts School Building Authority in no way guarantees the acceptance or the approval of an application, the awarding of a grant, or any other funding commitment from the Massachusetts School Building Authority, or commits the town to filing an application for funding with the Massachusetts School Building Authority, and hereby further authorizes the chair to sign on the board's behalf. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. It has been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, Ms. Musto.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a quick question. Whenever these letters are submitted, does it always go through this process? Because I believe have there been previous letters, and is this the process we've taken? I'm just trying to understand.
Yes, and this authorizes the chair to endorse the documents that would be submitted by the end of the week. They have to be in with the MSBA by Friday, and we expect that we'll receive the document on Thursday. And I would provide a signature pending the decision of the approval of the Select Board on this motion. Mr. Zulus.
Thank you. I was just going to say, Ms. Romero, Ms. Rosemarin, sorry, could provide a history of the prior statements of interest that have been submitted, and it has been this process. The school committee has to approve, and then the Select Board has to approve, and then the superintendent submits it. But she can certainly go through it. She's been the primary. She's carried the laboring oar on this rather extensive application, which is several hundred pages before and this year, I believe, as well.
Mr. Zulus, Ada is in the attendee list. Are you asking for her to be promoted to do so?
Yeah, if the board wishes, I'm familiar with the process, having been on the committee, and familiar with all the work that she has done to compile this application. But really, it's if the board wants to hear that or not.
Ms. Musto, are you satisfied with the information you've received?
I understand. I guess what I was wondering is what the process was. So more the process is, I think Mike just explained what the process is. And I guess my other question is, have we submitted the same application each time, or do we alter it? And also, I know that we've submitted a few times before. So what number is this, I guess, in the submission for recently?
Yeah. I believe this is number, oh, thank you, Mr. Chair, sorry. I believe this is number 4, because we've been in existence 4 years, and so I believe it's number 4. The application, and again, Ms. Rosemarin can speak in specifics, but the application is updated every year with additional and new information that we gleaned during the succeeding year. 1 year, we made we made the first level cut. I think that was the first year. And this is a competitive process. So the school building committee, there are many districts that apply for these funds. Only a very few are awarded the funds, in part because the school building authority's financial ability has been significantly drained. And so there aren't many school building authority, the school building authority funds have been significantly diminished, so there's not much opportunity at this point. But as I said, we made the cut, I believe, the first year, and then I don't believe we made that first level cut last year. Again, it really depends on how many districts apply and which ones make the cut, but a very few number actually have gotten the funding over the last few years.
Thank you, Mr. Soulis. Mr. Wells, I think you wanted to address the topic.
I'm fine with Mr. Zul. I'm ready to vote.
Okay.
I'm ready to vote.
So I'm sorry to belabor the point, but I apologize.
It has been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Roll call vote. Mr. Zulus.
Yes.
Mr. Wells.
Yes.
Ms. Bradley.
Yes.
Ms. Musto.
Yes.
And Mr. Doyle. Yes, it is unanimous. Item number 5 is discussion approval select board position on ballot question number 1 at the annual town election. Shall the town vote to have its elected town treasurer, collector of taxes, become an appointed treasurer, collector of taxes of the town? We have a proposed motion on this, and the select board has previously approved an article to this effect. Mr. Milano, did you want to make any comment on this particular agenda item?
I think Mr. Chair, you covered it.
I'm sorry?
I said he wants to apply for the job.
No further comment from me. I think you covered, Mr. Chair. Just if the select board was interested in taking a public position on this ballot question beyond its vote previously before the town meeting.
Thank you. There is a proposed motion. Does somebody wish to make the motion?
I don't have it, but go ahead, Michael. I don't have it, so go ahead.
Okay, I'll make the motion. I'll move to support ballot question 1 at the annual town election. Shall the town vote to have elected town treasurer collector of taxes become an appointed treasurer collector of taxes of the town?
Thank you, Mr. Willis. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. It is moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Wells.
Just a point of thanks. This is a significant change for our community, and I would be remiss, especially as a former town employee for many years, to thank Jim McGaugh for all of his dedication and hard work, and prior to that, Kevin Sorgi, the prior treasurer, for all the years of dedication and hard work that they put in as our elected treasurers annually, past however many decades that includes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. That's appreciated. Any further comment, Mr. Zulus?
That's entirely appropriate. But I would also add, I think, the thanks to the many members of the Town Government Study Committee who reviewed this, studied it, and made the proposal a few years ago. And there were several members of the committee. I won't name them because I don't want to miss any of them, but there were several members of our community who worked on this to make this proposal to the town.
2 of them are deceased, John Cronin and Marvin Gordon, both now deceased. 2 original members.
Thank you, Mr. Zulus and Mr. Wells. Seeing no further discussion, roll call vote. Mr. Zulus.
Yes.
Mr. Wells.
Yes.
Ms. Bradley.
Yes.
Ms. Musto.
Yes.
Mr. Doyle. Yes, it is unanimous. Item number 6 is discussion approval Milton Animal Shelter Project and site selection. Mr. Milano, can I turn to you for some comments on this item, please?
Sure. I think as had been discussed at the prior meeting, as well as the meeting of the trustees, there was one question raised by Attorney McKettrick as to whether the select board would vote to ask the Animal Shelter Advisory Committee to take a look at the trustees' property and determine where, a shelter might be a good location and to start working towards a conceptual site sketch. So I think from where things stand currently, that's one question from the select board. The second is continuing on our current path in terms of siting a potential shelter on the access road. For a status update on that, as we've discussed before, the cost estimate is due in on Thursday, April 13th. The Animal Shelter Advisory Committee does have a meeting scheduled for Friday to review the bid documents, to review the cost estimate, and then make a potential recommendation to the select board as to whether or not to put the project out to bid, which would subsequently appear on the select board agenda on April 18th. So, whether to keep going down that path, as well as the second piece of where things stand presently. So again, that's April 13th to have a cost estimate and a potential approval to release the bid documents at the select board's next meeting on April 18th.
Thank you, Nick. Mr. Wells, you're recognized.
So just to follow up to, I wasn't sure if Mr. Milano mentioned this. So on that, they've broken that into two parts, right? One is the building and the other is site prep, because if we were to take this vote to do this, the site prep cost, which has really been one of the major hangups and huge obstacles for the dump road location, which is easily $1 million, if not more. And that doesn't even include the utility, bring in utilities. That would not be necessary if we did vote to look at either individually or, as Mr. Zula suggested last week, parallel to this. Am I correct on that? They're doing it, they broke that down into two things. One is site cost and the other is the modular building cost. Am I correct there?
So my understanding is that it would be one bid package that gets released, but there are multiple components of that package, including the site work and site prep, as well as the modular construction. And then, so there's different components of one bid package that would be released. So if the town goes through the process and receives bids back, we would have granular information about each component of that project at that point.
I'm all set. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Nick. I'm all set.
Thank you. What is the will of the select board? Do we need a motion at this time, or is this something that we defer until the next meeting and have additional information? Ms. Bradley, did you want to be recognized?
I don't know that we need to defer it. I mean, we just voted as the trustees to say that the AG should look at whether or not we can use this land. I don't think that it would be an issue for us to vote for the Animal Shelter Advisory Committee to look into another site. Not saying that whatever the process is, they should follow that, but I don't, if the Attorney General's office comes back and says that it's good to go, then we don't want to be behind the 8 ball with then having to start this process. So I don't understand why it would be an issue if we did them both at the same time. And I think that's what Mr. Zulus was saying the last time, and I was trying to get clarification on it. Because I think we can walk and chew gum. I think we can do both at the same time. And if the AG's office says, yeah, we're good to go, I want to get those shovels in the ground, because as we heard earlier, these buildings are falling apart. So not only is it a liability for the town, it leaves us open, but it might also leave $2.5 million sitting on a table. So I guess I don't understand why we would need to wait to vote. I just want to get this going.
And that is the reason for the chair asking the question that was asked.
All right,
clarification, and you did a good job in that. Mr. Wells, then Mr. Zulus. There was a method to my madness.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just, given my many hands in this, I don't want to make the motion, but I was hoping that maybe Mr. Zulus would make the motion similar to what he had suggested last week, that we look at both, we take a parallel process here looking at both of them. That's just my thought, but he doesn't have to. That's been in my head since you said last week.
That's consistent with the prior conversation and discussion. Mr. Zulus, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I agree with that. However, if we're getting the cost back on Thursday and the advisory board is meeting on Friday, seems to me they can make a recommendation with respect to this project, and then we can go back and say, well, okay. I mean, it doesn't really matter too much. I just don't want to put too much on them. I don't want the animal advisory, animal shelter building advisory committee to think they have to make a decision on Friday, one way or the other. It seems to me that they have a lot to do on Friday because they're going to be getting the costs and they're going to be deciding whether to recommend an RFP. And perhaps it might be better to see where they come down on that. And then next Tuesday, we can then instruct them, okay, either you have an RFP and let's continue down both paths, or you don't have an RFP, so let's just go down one path. So I'm kind of agnostic as to whether we instruct them now or not. I just didn't want to give them too much to have to do on Friday.
Thank you,
So I think Aaron had her hand up first.
Ms. Bradley, you're recognized, and then Mr. Wells.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to follow up on what Mr. Zulus just said. I believe that they have been waiting for this cost estimate and have been told that they were going to get it at least 3 or 4 times at this point. I want to say definitely 2 that I know of because I've joined those meetings because they happen to be on my lunchtime. And those cost estimates have not been there. So they continuously are pushing this back. It's been almost, I want to say 3 weeks, but please don't quote me on that. But it's been a while since they've been waiting for this cost estimate. So I don't know. It's what's the difference of a week? It doesn't mean that they have to take action on Friday on this, but if they don't get a cost estimate on Friday, I think that would be a good thing. I don't know.
Mr. Wells.
So Ms. Bradley is 100% correct. This has been kicked down the can. This can has been kicked down the road so far. I can't recall. Just for history, on the last bid that this board or the prior board dealt with, the cost estimate was 3.3 million and 3.1, and the low bid came in at 5.9 with the high bid at 7. So I'm not putting all my faith in the cost estimator anymore on this. And to Aaron's point, we don't want to leave this potential $2.5 million on the table. We do not want to lose this.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. So do we have a motion then?
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chair. Hold on, let me try and find the motioning. I move to approve, what would we call this site?
Town farm.
The what? Richard, I
Town
can't hear.
farm, the town farm site, the Governor Stoughton Road site.
Thank you. So I move to approve the town farm site, the current Governor Stoughton site, as a site for the animal shelter and for the Animal Shelter Advisory Committee to, I don't think that's right, Mike?
No.
I don't think so either. This motion's not written properly. I think we're just, sorry, I was reading that and I was like, this is not right.
No.
Okay, I think we're just voting to approve the Animal Shelter Advisory Committee to investigate whether or not rebuilding the animal shelter on the current site of the animal shelter is appropriate. And please, friendly amendments are welcome at this point.
I'll second that.
Okay, all right.
Seconded. Okay. I'm sorry, Ms. Foster. Did you start to say something? Did you want to finish that comment?
I was just saying I would second what she just said.
Mr. Zulus?
And I'll offer a friendly amendment just to make clear that we're proceeding on parallel tracks here to say, in addition to the continuing work with respect to the access road site.
Good clarification. I think we're all in agreement with that, unless somebody signals otherwise.
That's what I was asking for in the beginning, so I'm fine with that.
Okay. It's moved and seconded. Lynn, do you have all of that?
Sorry, Lynn.
She's smiling. She has it. And of course, we have the recording. So that it's been moved and seconded. Seeing no further discussion, roll call vote. Mr. Zulus,
Yes.
Mr. Wells,
Yes.
Ms. Bradley,
Yes.
Ms. Musto,
Yes.
Mr. Doyle, unanimous. Thank you. We do not have item number 7, as was mentioned at the beginning of our meeting. So we go to item number 8, which is discussion and approval, purchase and sales agreement with Discovery Schoolhouse Incorporated for the purchase of the Kidder Branch Library located at 101 Blue Hills Parkway. There is a proposed motion. Does anybody wish to make the motion?
Mr. Chair, I don't have it in front of me, but I'll make a motion to approve the purchase and sale agreement with the Discovery Schoolhouse.
Okay, I will read the motion that you're verbalizing. Move to approve the purchase and sales agreement with Discovery Schoolhouse Incorporated for the purchase of the Kidder Branch Library located at 101 Blue Hills Parkway. Is there a second to Mr. Wells' motion?
I'll second.
Oh,
Okay, Mr. Zulus, I think I heard you first. Moved and seconded. Seeing no further discussion, a roll call vote. Mr. Zulus,
yes.
Mr. Wells,
Yes.
Ms. Bradley,
Yes.
Ms. Musto,
Yes.
Mr. Doyle, it is unanimous.
Congratulations.
Item number 9. Discussion approval transfers of various parcels of land to the Conservation Commission and Board of Park Commissioners contingent upon approval of town meeting.
Mr. Chair?
I think as listed. Mr. Wells?
Just based on, because I haven't really had a lot of time to look at all this. I know the intention of it. I know just based on everything that Mr. Jackson read to us tonight, maybe it might be prudent for us to defer this until Tuesday. Do we have to vote this tonight? Or could it wait until Tuesday? He did seem to cite a lot of things there that I seem to have credit to, seem to give credence to. So before we do this, I just want to love to use the term in my police academy class was terra firma, but that's just my request, just a thought.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wells, for that question being raised. And I think we do have Sean O'Rourke of the School Building Committee, the chair of the School Building Committee, among the attendees, if we wish to call upon him. Mr. Milano, you recognize, sir?
Yes, I was going to just note that Mr. O'Rourke is available to attend. I know his availability next week, I believe, is a little bit trickier. And I can provide some follow-up to Mr. Jackson's comments to the board if helpful as well.
Thank you. I think at this time, the chair would like to promote Mr. O'Rourke for commentary so that we have his input at this time. So, Sean, could you do so? And that's Sean Doyle. Having done so, Sean O'Rourke, you're with us and you're muted. You are no longer muted. Welcome to the meeting.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to present tonight. If you so desire, is have a quick presentation in regards to the agenda items, if that works.
A quick presentation would be welcomed, I think, by the board.
Okay. And just confirming, you can see my screen.
You can, thank you.
So essentially what we're doing is, as of tonight, we just wanted to kind of provide an update based on some information that we received in two forms. One was a letter to the Conservation Commission kind of at the end of March that drove us to do additional work or homework that we looked through, some findings that came out of that, and then also an update from a site walk that yourself, Mr. Chair, Mr. Kiernan from the Conservation Commission, myself, and Ms. Milano went on with the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. As the board's aware, we have 3 parcels, essentially 2 on Herrick Drive, and 1 on School Street that were proposed previously. We also have a roughly 6-acre parcel on Randolph Ave. There was a letter that came in on March 28th to the Conservation Commission stating that the entire parcel of Randolph Ave was covered by Article 97. The basis for that was the hatching that you see there, the black kind of spots that exist over the map. So working with town planner Tim Zawinski, we pulled the deed to kind of review the basis for where that came from. Surprisingly, that parcel was taken by eminent domain. And then essentially the 6 acres that we're utilizing in the middle, highlighted kind of in the bottom second image, are listed as 6 acres for municipal purposes. So we confirmed that the mapping on the Mass GIS was incorrect and that the 6 acres are eligible for the swap. Further, when we looked at that map, we became aware of 3 parcels that were kind of known to the town as being parkland, but they weren't hatched. Those are the 3 parcels that were added, essentially along Bailey Avenue, Orchard Road, and Ash. Those, working with the town planner again, he believed they were not covered under Article 97. Obviously, based on the commentary tonight, we'll do additional work to check on that. But that's essentially how we arrived at creating those additional parcels. When you look at them, they're kind of at the dead ends of Bailey and Orchard Street, and Ash Street is kind of a right-of-way that runs along the golf course. In addition, some of the information we received from the Executive Office and Energy and Environmental Affairs, as we're talking with them during the site walks, we mentioned that there were other parcels that we were deeding to the conservation land. But we weren't including them as part of the language for the Article 97 swap. The reason being it was, we come to find out that they were covered under Article 97 already. However, the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs asked us to include the language for the switching or the change of ownership of Article 97 land, specifically the one that we identified on Canton Highland Avenue, which is roughly 5 acres. And then the other one that we're aware of at Pope's Pond, essentially for 41 acres. So when we look at the numbers that we're looking at here, with the inclusion of Bailey, Orchard, and Ash Street into Article 97, we'd be at roughly 16 acres, and total out of Article 97 is about 7.26 acres. Per EOEAA, we included, or the article for town meeting would need to be revised to include the Canton and Highland parcel and also Pope's Pond. When you look at it, again, under the lens of strictly conservation land, the amount of conservation land we're using for this project is only 2.8 acres. And as a reminder to everybody, last year our proposal was using 6.8 acres. In response, in addition to that, deeded land into conservation will be over 56 acres in total. In regards to the parcels that would be on Bailey, Orchard, and Ash Street, there's roughly about 5.89 acres there that would be transferred into active recreation or parks land to make up for the 4.445 acres coming out. And essentially with that, Mr. Chair, I'll just open to any questions if there are any.
Thank you very much, Mr. O'Rourke. Members of the Select Board, questions or comments for Mr. O'Rourke? Yes, Mr. Wells. Does that clarify for you what you were seeking? Richard, you're on mute.
I got it. I am muted. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Sean. I clearly understand the intention and the purpose, but did you hear Mr. Jackson's comments tonight regarding most of what is listed before us tonight? I just don't want to see us take a vote to do something that we're undoing. I mean, he cited a lot of things that I've never, we just got this, so I've not looked at any of this, but he seemed to know quite a bit of history, and just my colleagues heard tonight. I just wondering if you heard it in your familiar with the information that he provided to us tonight.
Yeah, so unfortunately, I was at my uncle's wake earlier,
Okay.
hence the
Sorry.
no, it's fine. But I have not heard it. Obviously, we don't want to do anything that is incorrect or wrong. But it was essentially from the work that we were doing, looking at Randolph Ave and the map there, and then working with Tim Zawinski over the past couple of weeks to come to this conclusion. It wasn't anything that I just, pulled it off myself and added in there. So we have been working diligently with the town.
So I get that. And that was the only reason I asked to defer, because he was citing and reading off things that he seemed, I mean, as you know, he's been in this arena before.
Yep.
He was citing things that I'm not familiar with, but that he seemed to feel pretty comfortable and secure what he was saying. So that's the only reason I wanted to make the motion to defer this, so that Tuesday night, it gives us some time to have a better understanding of exactly what's what. That's all I have to say. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Sean.
You're welcome, Mr. Wells. Mr. O'Rourke, attended to Mr. Wells' earlier commentary on this was whether a deferral by a week would be an issue for the school building committee.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I leave on vacation tomorrow, but obviously the importance of everything going on, I'll happily jump on any call at any time.
Thank you, Mr. O'Rourke. Mr. Sulis, you're recognized, and then Ms. Musto.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Two things. One, I think Richard was referencing Mr. Jackson's comments. I think what Mr. Jackson said was that Highland and Pope's Pond could not be included in Article 97, and again, apparently it's the Executive Office of Environmental Affairs is asking us to make that transfer. And then he similarly, with respect to the final three parcels at Orchard, Bailey, and Ash, cited a 1964 town meeting vote. So I believe Mr. Milano said he may have additional information with respect to those things, and if he does, perhaps we could hear that. Thank you.
Mr. Milano.
Sure. So just kind of go in order. So what is on the select board's agenda tonight would be to authorize moving control of these parcels, as they are under the select board's control currently, to control of either the Conservation Commission or the Board of Park Commissioners. So while it's related to a land swap, and Article 97 would have to be triggered as to approve this ultimately, it's a little bit of a narrower agenda item tonight, where right now the select board saying, yes, we would be okay with transferring these parcels under our control to these entities so described. So, specifically in terms of Canton and Highland, it is under the town select board control. Although we acknowledge it is already protected by Article 97, we would move forward with moving it from select board to conservation. And we've been advised by EEA that in order to do that transfer, we should follow the Article 97 process to dot our I's and cross our T's to button it up. So whether or not it's considered a metric in terms of EEA looking at the land swap in its entirety, they are recommending that we follow the Article 97 process for any transfer of land protected by Article 97 from one entity to another. So that's the rationale for the Pope's Pond parcel and the Canton and Highland one. I'll just acknowledge on the Board of Parks transfers for the three parcels at Orchard, Bailey, and the Ash Street, the paper street known as Ash Street. We've been researching those since they were brought to our attention. We did go through the town reports. Mr. Jackson had better eyes than us, or perhaps longer institutional memory than us. So we had been, we expected to find a town meeting vote. We had not. As late as Friday, we were still going through those town meeting records, and we're still continuing to research to make sure that to make sure 100% where those three parcels were. They are identified as parks parcels on our assessors map, so we just did not have a record of a town meeting vote, and we're chasing that down. So Mr. Jackson has pointed us to the 1964 town meeting vote. We did go through that town report. We'll go back to it tomorrow just to double check. But assuming that's correct, then in this case, that would preclude the select board from having control of them this evening and right now. So we can double check that tomorrow and report back to the board in terms of those 3 parcels, which are a little bit separate from the other ones listed.
Thank you, Mr. Milano. Ms. Musto, then Mr. Wells, and Mr. Zulus.
Thank you. So when I read this, it says transfers of various parcels of land to Conservation Commission, Board of Park Commissioners contingent upon approval of town meeting. And then it lists them including. So my question is, first of all, I think Mr. Jackson brought up a lot of facts, you know, relating to different town meetings that approve different parcels and this and that. It would be good, I think, I would rather have this discussed at the next meeting, but I want some documentation for each of these parcels. I want to see a piece of paper with what the parcel is, what the where it's at now, if it's in parks or whatever it's in the town meeting approval, what it was approved for. And the other question I have is, it seems to me like we're trying to put like a catch-all, to put all of these things in here to do everything all at once, to do like, you know, transferring all these properties, you know, these lots and doing all sorts of stuff with this. To me, if you want to do things where you want to put it into, you know, into a board of parks or wherever you want to put it, it would be much cleaner to do a separate article to do those things. We're trying to put everything in it, you know, that if this happens, then we'll do all of this. When to me, it seems like if you want to do all of these transfers because you're trying to clean things up, you should have done it as a separate article. So it seems like a catch-all. It seems like we're trying, now we've added Bailey Ave. Now we just keep adding, subtracting. You know, it's hard to follow, actually. So I feel like we need more information. And I think Mr. Jackson brought up some interesting facts, and I'd like to have them clarified. And perhaps Mr. Freitag can look at each of these properties and maybe somebody can produce some kind of a, you know, information with all of these. Because for instance, it seems like Bailey Ave, we're thinking of putting it in here. It's the first time I've heard of it. You know, it's very confusing. And if you want to put things into certain, whether you want to put it into conservation cleanly or wherever you want to put it, that you should do separate articles for that instead of throwing it all into this one article with this transfer. Thank you.
Arthur, you're muted.
Thank you, Mr. Zulus. Clarification, if I may, Roxanne. Do you mean article or separate motion?
I guess what I'm saying is when I read this particular thing that we're trying to discuss here, we're looking at transferring different articles, parcels of land to conservation and Board of Parks. And all of that is contingent upon approval of town meeting. To me, if you want to clear up some of these law, like where they are now, are they properly in conservation? Are they already properly in with the parks? I'm sort of confused because when I heard some of what Mr. Jackson said, there's some questions on some of them. They're being identified as in conservation, but then they're not in conservation. I just think it's messy. I think we need to clear it up first with the different parcels. Do you understand or not? I guess what I'm trying to say is that there are all of these different parcels listed, Pope's Pond, for instance. And, you know, Mr. Jackson saying, you know, that it's technically, you know, whatever he said it, so I don't have it in front of me right this minute, but he defined it a certain way. But we're trying to throw it in here and classify it as making it officially conservation and different things like that. Is that clearing it up or is that making it more messy for all of you?
I understand. And I think what you're really talking about is the motions rather than articles. So that
I guess I'm looking at each of the properties that were identified, and I'd like to see where they stand now. What that was, it town meeting vote that voted it's already in conservation, but we're thinking of putting it here as a conservation swap when it technically is already in conservation, but we're trying to capture it in here to make it into conservation land as a small.
We have Mr. Wells, Mr. Zulus, and I may call him Mr. Freytag to help you with a clarification between Chapter 97 properties and then Chapter 97 properties that would be allowed to go into conservation.
Thank you.
Mr. Wells.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sean, first thing, you're going on vacation. So we'll get through this. So you're going on vacation. We're not calling you. Mr. Zulus can handle anything here with us while you're gone. So that's first. I'm just trying to look down the road here for you. And I'm asking questions tonight. I'm looking down to 4 weeks from now on town meeting 4, and I'm trying to, in a way, I guess what Ms. Muscle says, to clean everything up. So I'm just reading and voting and moving on. Just what I heard from Mr. Jackson stuff was enough to make me say, okay, so let's, as I said earlier, I just wanted to defer this to Tuesday because we just got this tonight. He was another curveball on it. Like, I want, whatever we're doing here, I want to make sure we're on firm ground and that we don't have to undo. I want to be, even Mr. Warner, so I got to look further. So if we have to look at anything further on this, let's do it now. And then once we're done, then I'm happy to vote. I just want to be sure that what we're doing is absolutely procedurally and correct. I get what you're doing, though. I get it.
Mr. Zulus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So let me try, and then maybe Nick can do better than I can. So with respect to the parcel on Randolph Ave, Herrick Drive, School Street, Highland Street, and Pope's Pond, I didn't hear Mr. Jackson say that those properties, that those parcels were controlled by conservation. Those parcels are controlled by the select board. And all we're doing is to approve the transfer from the select board to conservation, the Conservation Commission, which I think everyone agrees, contingent on town meeting approval, which is required in order to do it. So that's why it says contingent on town meeting approval, because we can't do it without having town meeting approval. So that's with respect to those 5 parcels. We know who owns them, and we, at least many of us, think they should be owned and controlled by conservation as opposed to the select board. That's all we're doing. With respect to parcels F, G, and H, the Orchard Road, Bailey Avenue, and Ash, Mr. Jackson did say on those that his understanding was that there was a 1964 town meeting vote that put those under the ownership and control of Parks Department and not the select board. Mr. Milano has said that they will double check that 1964 vote to see if it was actually put in the Parks Department rather than the select board. However, I think regardless, everyone agrees, or anyone that I know of agrees, that those properties, those parcels should be in the Parks Department, and that we would transfer them from the select board to the Parks Department, again, contingent on town meeting approval, because that's required. So I think the only thing that Mr. Milano needs to double check here is whether there was a 1964 town meeting vote with respect to the Orchard Road, Bailey Avenue, and Ash Street parcels that put them in, gave ownership and control to the Parks Commissioners rather than the select board. Everything else we know and wasn't disputed by Mr. Jackson tonight, at least as I understood it. So I would be prepared to move forward on, all of them, because even with respect to the Parks one, if Mr. Milano's in our town planners review was wrong initially, we would be approving a transfer that ultimately would be unnecessary if Mr. Milano and the town planner were somehow wrong. So I'm comfortable moving forward because I think these properties should be owned and controlled by Conservation Commission and the Parks Department and not the select board. And that I'm comfortable moving forward on them knowing that it's contingent on town meeting approval because that's required. So maybe I talked too much and maybe Mr. Milano can correct where I went astray.
Thank you. The only thing, if I could, Mr. Chair, is just to piggyback is we talk, I think what has happened in the conversation on this, and it is confusing and it's taken me, time to get up to speed on it myself as starting in September, is that, there's a question of ownership and control that's in one bucket, and the question of use. Nothing that the select board would be voting on tonight is saying that, Pope's Pond can be used for general municipal purposes. I think we've all acknowledged, and the board has acknowledged that was acquired for the reasons it was acquired for, and that use has always been protected by Article 97. It's more the ownership and control of the parcels, and that's what the item is today, and that would be ultimately approved by town meeting. Is taking the control of these parcels here and moving them to another body within the town, not saying anything about the use of them, just the control. So it's ownership versus use, and so I think Mr. Jackson's comments were about the use of Highland and Cannon, about the use of Pope's Pond, whereas what the board has tonight on an agenda item is to transfer control and ownership of them.
Ms. Musto.
I understand what you're saying. I guess I would rather, I feel like Mr. Jackson had a lot of information in what he said. Is there any reason why we can't wait to the meeting next week when we can get more, clarification?
Mr. Zulus?
The only reason not to wait is out of consideration for Mr. O'Rourke's schedule. That would be the only reason to go ahead and move forward that I can see.
Mr. Wells?
So, Mr. Chair, I'm going to make a motion if Mr. Zulus would accept this. I'm going to make a motion to approve A, B, C, E, F, G, and H. How's that? We'll look at that. We'll come back to that. So is it Highland Street? Did I have that correct? Mr. Milano is the one you want to look a little further at? Is that correct in that you said it was Highland Street? Can't now?
I was referring to the three that Mr. Jackson mentioned from the 1964 town meeting vote, which missed
F, G, and H.
our research.
All right, so I'll include E, I'll leave out G and H. How's that? So A, B, C, D, E, and F. We'll make a motion to approve all of those.
For clarification purposes, F, G, and H are the ones that Mr. Milano was talking about with respect to the Parks Department. And I think what you therefore are intending, Mr. Wells, is A, B, C, D, and E.
That's correct.
Okay, and that would be consistent, Richard, with the proposed motion. And
yes.
If the board would allow, I'll just read it so that everybody understands it, and then you can decide your action. So, Richard, would be to move to approve the transfers of the following parcels of land from the Select Board to the Conservation Commission, contingent upon approval of town meeting. First, approximately 6 acres of land located on Randolph Avenue, shown on the Town of Milton Assessors Map as Map I, Block 38D, Lot 10A. Second, approximately 3 acres of land located on Herrick Drive, shown on the Town of Milton Assessors Map as Map E, Block 17, Lot 35, and Map E, Block 17, Lot 35. Third, approximately 1 acre of land located on School Street, shown on the Town of Milton's Assessors Maps as Map E, Block 17, lot 19. 4, approximately 5 acres of land located at the corner of Highland Street and Canton Avenue, shown on the town of Milton's assessors maps as map K, block 2, lot 1A, and 5, approximately 41 acres of land located around and inclusive of Pope's Pond, shown on the town of Milton's assessors maps as map C, block 34A, lot 4. And those would be consistent with your A, B, C, D, and E, Richard.
That's correct. Thank you,
Is
Mr.
that,
Chair.
is that your motion?
That's correct, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, so it is moved then by Mr. Wells. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Solis has moved and seconded. Discussion, Ms. Musto, you're recognized.
Thank you. I just want to make sure I understand this clearly, though. So when I read this, all of these transfers are contingent upon approval of town meeting, and the way that they're going to get approved is through the Article 31. Is that correct?
I think so.
Anybody?
Nick, do you have the?
I don't have the number.
Yes, it would be, that's the article that would do the land swap. Article 32 is the one related to eminent domain.
Okay, because that's what I'm looking at, number 10. So I guess what I'm saying is that the way I read it is that if the Article 31 land swap goes through, then all these transfers will happen. If not, none of these transfers are going to happen. That's what I'm hearing. Is that correct? I mean, that's what it seems like to me, because that's what I was asking. My question was, again, if you really wanted all of those transfers to happen, you could have done a separate article for that and not had it all within, throwing in now Bailey Ave and everything into this proposed Article 31.
Mr. Zulus.
Well, the reason it's in the article is that's the whole purpose of it, right? That's the whole purpose of the land swap. But to your point, if it's not approved at town meeting, there could be an article at the fall town meeting doing exactly the same thing. So, and the select board's view would be the same view. So.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that. That's all.
That's a good point. Thank you for doing so. So it has been moved and seconded. Mr. Zulus, you seconded, did I recall, or was it Ms. Bradley?
I think it was me.
It was, okay. Moved and seconded, seeing no further discussion, roll call vote. Mr. Zulus?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Ms. Bradley?
Yes.
Ms. Musto?
I'll abstain.
And Mr. Doyle, yes. So it is 4-1. 4, I'm sorry, correction. 4 yes, 1 abstention. Thank you. Now, what is the will of the select board with respect to the next motion under 9? This would be to move to approve the transfers of the following parcels of land from the select board to the Board of Park Commissioners, contingent upon approval of town meeting. Mr. Wells.
So, Mr. Chair, if I could, back to my original, because I don't want to vote no, and I don't want to split vote. So if we could just, if Mr. Milano could, with Mr. Zawinski, just do the due diligence to answer those questions for me, I'd be happy. I don't need Sean here. And if we could put that on, if it's all cleared up on for the vote Tuesday, I'll be happy with that. If that's.
Is that agreeable to the other members of the board? Okay.
As long as we don't need Sean here.
No, don't. No.
Ask a question.
Certainly. I see assent from the other members of the board. Ms. Musto?
Nope, it was me. It was Aaron.
I'm sorry, Aaron. I see your hand now. Yeah.
It's okay. I know it blends in. Does this set back, and I'm just curious, but does this set back the warrant committee at all if we don't do this all tonight? I'm just thinking of their time and and whether or not it impacts them. If not, I'm fine with waiting, but I just wanted to know.
Mr. Milano, what's your sense of that for Ms. Bradley?
So they have taken a vote on this article to not recommend it. Whether, it turns out that these parcels that we've identified are still truly under the care and control of the select board and could be transferred to the Board of Park Commissioners, whether that they would reconvene to reconsider, I can't speak to. Obviously, if that were the case, more time is better than less. But as far as I know, they don't have a meeting schedule at this point. So the earliest they could meet at right now anyway would be Monday at the absolute earliest. So I don't know that it really would affect them too much. And next week's April vacation week, so school vacation week rather. So I don't even know if they would be
Monday's a holiday.
looking to meet next week anyway.
Right. Okay. Thanks. I was just curious.
Yeah, that's my best guess on it.
Thank you. So we're deferring these three. That seems to be the consensus. With respect to item 10 on the agenda, discussion approval update to the warrant committee regarding additional land transfers associated with the proposed Article 97 land swap, Article 31 at the 2023 annual town meeting. Is that to be deferred until
I would think that makes sense, Mr. Chair, just to defer 10 to go with it so that when we send it to the warrant committee, it's all inclusive of all there.
That makes sense. The options would be to do it piecemeal, but if you're comfortable with deferring it until Tuesday, then it's a package as a whole, if that's the way the vote turns out. Okay.
Let's let Sean go home.
He's had a long day and a tough week. Item 11, public comment response.
Good night, Sean. Thank you. Sorry for your loss.
Thank you. Good night.
Just to ask, while we're at this item on the agenda, Nick, if you had any thing to report?
I do not at this time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. The chair has only one comment, and that is to say that I received some positive feedback on the packet that is now available in the select board meetings. Ms. Musto, you had initiated that. And along with that feedback was some comments to the effect that it would be nice if that were done for other bodies meetings as well as is being done for the select board. And now to go to other members for comments that they may have. Ms. Bradley, you are recognized.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. In regards to what Ms. Holden brought up at the beginning during public comment, I am wondering if the select board is going to discuss or take any action on things that are absolute lies that were sent out. I have not heard of anybody trying to get rid of our form of town government, nor have I been approached by anybody who thinks that we should have one ruler in our town. This is news to me, and if others have been approached about this, please come forth and let me know, because I worked really hard to get elected and be part of a 5-member select board. So that, to me, is an outright lie. But again, if somebody's heard this, please come forward. So I'm just wondering what the select board's plan of attack is, not plan of attack, but plan of correction, I guess would be the right way to say it. Specifically around that one. While I'm not here to debate others' interpretations of things that are coming before town meeting, I do think that people thinking that there are folks out there trying to abolish our way of town government, I find that offensive. All of us give a lot of our time. And I, for one, even though it's my only night off, I do enjoy seeing all of your faces every Tuesday for the month of April. So that one to me has really got me fired up because I don't see where it's coming from. So I just wanted to know what the select board was thinking or talking about, or if this was in fact true, and I am no longer going to be needed on Tuesday nights, so I can go join a knitting club. But I'm flabbergasted over that one. So any insight, Mr. Chair, would be great.
Thank you for that. Any other comments on this topic from other members of the select board at this time?
Just one question and a follow-up to Ms. Thank you, Mr. Chair, to Ms. Bradley's comments. In the most recent community access dialogue with candidates at the high school, one of the questions that was posed to us, and I'm not sure what the origin of it was the I don't want to use disbanded because I came up with, it was to no longer have a town meeting form of government in this town, to move to a different form of government. And I'm not sure where the question came from. They were all directed by students, but it was one of the first questions we asked. And I don't know. I hear Christine's comments and I hear her upset, but I've learned long ago in my career that the First Amendment is a pretty powerful thing.
Oh, yeah.
But I just want to finish to what Erin's saying. You're right. You can't just out and say, but the question about the dissolving government, that it wasn't shaped in that form, but it was a question to all of the panelists as far as moving Milton away from the town meeting form of government. I think it was like the first question that was asked of us. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's all I have.
You're welcome,
Thanks. I'll go back and watch it. Thank you.
Mr. Zulus.
So I think, at the risk of having discussion of something not on the agenda, maybe the question is whether it should be included on a subsequent agenda for a discussion.
I think you need to be more specific to what you want to discuss.
Ms. Musto.
I would just say that representative town meeting is what makes Milton special, right? So I'm not aware of anything other than that being floated, I guess. So for me, I think that's why we have a process. And the one thing I guess I would say that I have seen recently is a lot of, it's unfortunate during the season of, elections, a lot of bullying and a lot of things that are going on. And that was why we were talking about decorum and things like that, remember? And then, Kevin Freitag had said that there was that whole ruling with decorum, but there's a lot of things going on bullying wise with people. So I guess what I would say is, I think, and I'm just going to say this honestly, I think for all of us, we should stay clear of bullying other people, and we should be welcoming to anybody and different opinions. And so, I think that we have to be open-minded to everybody.
And Mr. Chair, I in no way was at all trying to say that we should limit free speech at all. That one really got me because I spend a lot of my time, here with you guys or at school. And if this was something that was going on, I would have hoped that somebody would have brought this to my attention. So I don't know that I need to have it on another agenda. I thank you for this conversation. And in no way, I love free speech. Are you kidding me? Even burning of the flag, because it's part of free speech. So no, I just wanted to know if I have my Tuesdays.
Thank you for that, one and all. I did have one additional observation that I wanted to make with respect to the sign review committee and the mention of the applicants. And I believe there are now multiple applicants for the vacancy. And I know we'll be having Erin and Roxanne, your progress on the volunteer application process at our next agenda. And I'm wondering if we shouldn't have something that addresses the issue of how vacancies on existing committees are filled, what recommended processes might be for that. there's a long-standing, I'm not talking about newly established committees, we know how that works. A long-standing tradition, Conservation Commission, going back decades, where the recommendations come out of the Conservation Committee to the Select Board. The Select Board can do what the Select Board should do. It makes the decisions. The same has been true with the Master Plan Implementation Committee. And I'm wondering if we should take a look at whether or not, when there are vacancies and there are applicants, that the applicants be submitted to the committee in question or the board in question. They make a recommendation to the Select Board. The Select Board reviews the applicants and the recommendation and then makes its own decision. I just pass that out for thought and consideration. The next item is future meeting dates. They are scheduled for, as was cited, next Tuesday, April 18th, and then Wednesday, April 26th, and Monday, May 1st, May Day. Everybody has those on their calendars. Unless there's further comment, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Ms. Musto. Seconded by Mr. Zulus. Seeing no discussion, Mr. Zulus.
Yes.
Mr. Wells.
Yes.
Ms. Bradley.
Yes.
Ms. Musto.
Yes.
Mr. Doyle. Unanimous. Have a great night, everyone.
Good night. Take
Good night.
care.
Right.
Thanks.